Welcome to Points to Ponder. My guest today is the Reverend Timothy Holder, a good friend and colleague. Timothy, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am speaking to you from my 10th generation home of Elizabethton, Carter County, Tennessee, way up in the mountains, where I never thought I would ever want to come home again when I left here. But I'm here as of 5 years this month. And it's been truly all these adjectives and so forth we use, and exclamations. But one of the most joyful things, thank goodness, that's ever happened to me. I've spent a career in politics. I still call myself a politician, proud of that. And I'm privileged to have known Joe Biden and Jill Biden in the 1980s when I served in 4 successive losing presidential campaigns. Been blessed with the best education, the University of the South at Sewanee, St. Mary's Elementary, as I mentioned, a public high school, Happy Valley High School here. And that led to seminary at Harvard, where I was privileged to to be taught by. I did 2 years of intensive study in African American studies with the likes of Henry Louis Gates. My faculty member was Preston Hamilton, who was good enough to have me for 2 years in the theology of Martin Luther King, traveling, contributing to Claiborne Carson's diaries, the diaries of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King I always loved him in politics, and as a kid, he was one of my heroes. But those diaries, I would sit reading for hours, and he became a spiritual presence to me in a very powerful way those years at Andover Library and Andover Newton there at Harvard Divinity. And Cornell West, who was very challenging. What's a white boy from Alabama like you doing in my class on WB Dubois? And that too was very defining. So I just sort of naturally, as I became a priest in the church and the Diocese of Alabama, ordained the first openly gay, no big parades, but we are who we are. And it helped me being 38 years old and having a little bit of maturity. God bless the Episcopal Church for putting up with me all these years. But I was ordained, and Bishop Stout allowed me to say, he said, "You're going to say not one thing about LGBT for about 2 or 3 months." I said, "Well, Bishop, I'm not, I'll come to you. Tell you what I'm going to say if I got anything to say. I'm just who I am." That led to a lot in a majority. Back then, we called them minority neighborhoods. And the big news in Birmingham, Alabama, a young white former political fella and Episcopalians have named to Woodlawn, to Grace Church Woodlawn, which was called a throwaway parish. I'd never heard that term. And I've been around the road a few times, and I wanted a place where I could really serve among real people, poor people. I knew the poverty within, and that's just where I was called from early on. And the whole theologies of street and altar, where I was privileged to study at Oxford, Keble, just came alive. And from that point, I've been in a majority of Black parishes. Those are the children of the South Bronx. And I love them to death. They're still in touch with me. And some had never seen a guy like me, a big white fella from the South. And it's just about being who you are. And the Episcopal Church and Christianity has meant very much that to me. I minister to a bilingual parish, a parish that is growing with LGBT folk, indeed, with traditional folk, with just wonderful programs of Appalachian music. I was just looking, as I'd mentioned to you, at some banjos and fiddles over in Bristol, the birthplace of country music. And we have a house band called after the river, the Doe River Ensemble. And at Advent, we have Appalachian evensongs, same in the summer. And we have artists, and we know how to do that, not just for show or performance. We worship together. And I'm writing a doctoral thesis, and I hope a couple books about it, so stay tuned.
One of the reasons I wanted to talk with you today was we serve on the same diocesan task force that has to do with racial reconciliation and anti-racism, becoming beloved community, all sorts of different names about it. And I remember you told a story on that as a way of introduction about just when you were a boy and something your father told you or something like that. Can you tell me that that story?
The story that I think that you're talking about was actually, I was 9 years old, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My father was a beautiful bass singer in the Melody Men Quartet. And I just sort of grew up in that kind of beautiful white gospel music. Dad had been in the Navy. He'd been around the world. He knew that there were people that looked different from him, acted different from him, smarter than him, and not as smart as he was. He comes home to Tennessee and joins what was the First Free Will Baptist, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful people. And I remember the folks, and I remember those who used to say, that's that guy little boy going over to the Roman Catholic school with the Pope and all this stuff. Be all that as it is, Dad would organize Sunday night singings 2-3 times a year anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And he was loved for that. Except one night, I was sitting next to my mother. We were midway back through a pretty good church. They'd have about 350 average Sunday attendance. And that's pretty nice. And Dad started with a quartet. I think it was his own quartet, the Melody Men. The second or third group of musicians up happened to be these beautiful women. I had grown up with some Black neighbors and people that I was in school with, and Dad's friends in sports. But I don't think I'd ever really had a faith kind of experience. Mm-hmm. And when they started singing, and I'm not trying to glamorize this or romanticize it, except to tell you, Jesus was in my heart. Mm-hmm. And it's like, And I didn't know quite how to react. I was 9 and so forth, but I knew that there was something holy and right, whatever words we want to put to that, it was good. Mm-hmm. And while that was happening, they started to get the Spirit, moving around a little bit, raising their hands, just the music becoming richer and richer and more elevated. That was my feeling, at least. Mm-hmm. My mother also was wiping a tear. I remember her. So as not to scar the makeup or anything, which fortunately I didn't have to wear. And Dad was standing up there with them, clapping his hands, I remember. And as the choir of these beautiful African-American women, I came to know 2 or 3 who I know today, thanks be to God, been in my church here. As they started singing and getting the Spirit, the Free Will Baptist started getting up and leaving. I knew enough to know. I was very conscious at that age. Dad had pinned a JFK button on me at the age of 5. I knew about Dr. King because my father told me about him and how good a man he was. My dad's words brought up abject poverty in Stony Creek here in Carter County. And I listened to my father and to my mother. I wanted to leave. I was pissed off. I mean, I was just really mad. And Mother said, she patted my knee, said, little boy, you sit down there right now. We'll be home. Well, it was sort of nothing after that. And it just felt dark to me. And I said, what are we going to do? What is this? Are we going to go apologize? We went up that Sunday out to the church and we apologized. And I'll never forget that. Now, immediately speaking, and my mom and dad were not talking for a while. It was just a very difficult experience. I felt that I never wanted to go back to that church. My father said, son, you don't have to. The maturity he had, but where was a 9-year-old going to go? They're going to drop me off at, the Roman Catholic Church. But from that time forward, I demanded in my own little spiritual life, okay, where are the gospels to the poor, the different, the castaway? Where are the gospels here? They weren't there. They were not there. And I had learned well from my father and from the Sisters of Mercy and the Dominican Fathers at St. Mary's. And politics, I started listening at a very early age to Robert Kennedy, to Hubert Humphrey, not knowing all the difficulty he was going through trying to breathe under LBJ's rule on civil rights initially, and then LBJ himself with the Civil Rights Act. I said, my gosh, this. And then, of course, Dr. King starting to march everywhere. And I was very cognizant of this, and I knew it was a good thing. And my parents very much approved of it and defended in public places. And this rock bed Republican area, which was pro-unionist, but very conservative in its politics and most of its faith here in this part of Central Appalachia, really northern, southern Appalachia. But that was the framework on which my entire life and career began, and was given what little action I might give it at the age of 9, 10, 11, and 12. But I knew that I was headed somewhere other than a pulpit that was disgraced by anything but love. That's why I was in politics for so many years. I found my gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, indeed, in Dr. King and Hubert Humphrey and the American Civil Rights Acts and in Robert Kennedy. That was my inspiration to go into politics. And it was not only revelatory, if I can even use that word at such a young age, but it was hope. Yes. It was real hope, and it was real gospel.
Right.
That's why politics can be, and I believe is a very good thing, even in this age that we live in today.
Yeah, you mentioned John Lewis, and the quote that we had was this one. I'm going to go ahead and read it. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something. And one of the things that brought this quote to mind in a conversation that we've had before is you're talking about the tendency of the church and other organizations, once they see that something is unjust, to form a book study group.
Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings too much, but there comes a time we got to get up from our desk. We got to, and I'm not trying to judge anybody except to say in my own experience, how many certificates, how many diplomas, how many books, 3 shelves over here, the complete diary, how much of that is enough? And I began to observe priests by middle part of my career. Oh, well, I've had anti-racism 3 times. Well, and? Or I've just read this new wonderful book and read the other one 6 months ago, and the other. This is a good thing. We're not anti-intellectual, thank God, in the Episcopal Church. We are not know-nothings. We know a lot. But there comes a time when we have to truly, as Dr. King preached and as Lewis lived big time, get out of the comfort zone and march across a bridge. Yes, not to be dramatic. Hope that no one ever is in a situation like that. But if it's real, let's get to it. As I said, I am 65 years old, and life really does not end. And the time goes on, and it's amazing to me. I've had dear friends from the halls of greatest intellects and so forth, North and South, and they will say, in Carter County, Black Lives Matter. In Carter County, a Latin congregation. In Carter County, an LGBT demonstration. Tri-Cities Pride, 10,003. I said, what is your problem? If God's abundant in Boston, Brookline, if God's abundant in San Francisco, if God's abundant in Birmingham, this is Carter County. Welcome to Appalachia, folk. What's your problem? So in that line and in that beauty, and God bless George and all those who've given their lives, most who we don't even know or know their names. Thank God bless Brian Stevenson and Just Mercy and his work in Montgomery, Alabama, and the Justice Peace Institute and so forth. But here we were looking at what happened over that 8 minutes to this human being. It's hard to watch today. It's just one of these very drenching kinds of experiences. And that's watching it, let alone it being a relative or family member or the same color. I'm very distant in many ways, most ways, from him and those others who've been hurt. So here this happened. What was the response here in Carter County? What was the response in Northeast Tennessee, Appalachia, all those hillbillies up there? They're all Trump people anyway. What was the response? Well, let me tell you what the response was. I was sitting reading, God bless the Johnson City Press, wonderful editorial saying they're having a march, they're having a march. Well, great. St. Thomas Episcopal Church, my parish, with Milligan, we went over to a program of preaching and sermonizing on the goodness of man and the injustice that had been done. And I had been invited to offer the prayer at a Black Lives Matter rally. I said, sure. And I'll see you over there. And I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I thought it might be, we had about, I don't know, 200 people maybe at the Milligan St. Thomas Christian event. And all of a sudden we hear these big, like, crowds coming. I said, oh my gosh, I guess we're okay. That, speaking to myself. And it was a huge line, and just yelling out and shouting out freedom and Black Lives Matter. These beautiful, not romanticizing anything, but these beautiful young folk. I don't think I'd ever seen that many young folk gathered, number one. And number two, I had for sure never seen that many young Black folk who were leading, who were organizing, taking responsibility. God bless ETSU. God bless the Johnson City Police Department, the mayor, the city council. I mean that. They guarded those kids. They escorted them. There were about a half a dozen arrested by midnight. I was there, sort of an unofficial chaplain, just hanging out with the police department and with the parade organizers. I said my prayer, and it was proclaiming a new day. Black Lives Matter for real. And it was being done not by this collar, God bless it, and not by a profession, God bless our professions, and not by a book, not by the greatest knowledge, but by just the spirit of a human being that was proclaiming. And it was one of the most, and I've been quite a few places, one of the most inspiring, and I will never forget it. I felt so proud to be even giving that benediction that night and blessing. I was the one. The community was one, the Tri-Cities of Tennessee being blessed. That organization remains strong today. They're present, they're smart, and they are not just our future. I mean, they are what's going on now. And that's in the Tri-Cities, 70, 75% plus Trump, if we want to get into politics. Don't ask me how. I can tell you why a little bit, and that's what I've just done. So am I called to do anything I'm asked to do for them, to act, to be present, to stay out of the way? Absolutely. I would give them anything and do anything. And that's the power of the Spirit that is available, I think, to all of us. If you will, thank you, John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, to get out of our comfort zone, move around, shout it out and mean it, and probably sacrifice a little bit here and there. I think there comes a time when there's no choice, but you have to, yes, to study, but you have to get out and make things actionable and sacrifice, as I said, a little bit if you are called to do that. And I think we are all called, certainly as Christians, and certainly as Americans, and certainly we clergy. I'm not saying that that's everybody's cup of tea, but I don't see how I'm 65, as I said, and I don't see how many, I mean, for decades, we've almost evaded closed churches. I mean, let's be very honest here. Closed doors, a welcome, yes. A politeness, yes. A giving, yes. We are hospitable, good, beautiful people, we Episcopalians. And I'd like to think most Christians. But when is that going to be expressed by a relationship, as you say? And if it's not, I have to really question in my own life and teaching the veracity of that which we call anti-racism, the truth of that which we call action. It doesn't exist without relationship, does it? So the relationship is something we have to step into, and we have to make a mental and spiritual decision to step into it, to step forward, to engage, not belligerently, not in a mean spirit. And God forgive me for anyone I've been mean to, and I know I have been before, but and self-righteous and so forth. But we have to step forward, and we have to take the door and open it, and we have to look and say, what is your problem? Why are we not in this room? Black Lives Matter is doing that today. And John Lewis became a saint of the American society, and the words of John Meacham, and God bless John Meacham for his stand these days. So that's a little bit, but relationship, how do you teach relationship? How do you learn relationship? I don't know how you do it if it's not experiential. And that's one of the, experiential concretization. Those are the teachings.
Mhm.
Paz, of all the great Boston, all the great liberationists,
Mhm.
and Cone and Dr. King. I mean, if it's not on the streets and so forth, what are we going to do? Sit here and write letters?
Mhm.
He could do a lot with a letter. Um,
Mhm.
and yes, I did speak of gradualism. Gradualism is not permissible in real, actionable civil rights.
Mhm.
How much time have we got? And as King reminded us from that jail cell, justice delayed is justice denied. That is the truth. We have the mind, and I think we definitely have the heart. We Episcopalians, we're good, celebratory, forward-looking, smart folk, and we need more of that in our leadership today. So the question now is, how do we more frequently, perhaps, more majoritively, perhaps, more in majority, I would hope, um, move this into action, physicality, the relationship, into support by monies, by programs, and so forth. Those are the steps that are long wanting. The names are great: anti-racism, building both community. That's all wonderful. But in the words of John Lewis, let's get on this bridge, let's march, and let's make some good trouble.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. God bless us.